it takes work, that you have to really know skills to make a relationship work. So, all of that really makes for difficulty. But it's interesting because the way that you get a relationship to go back to those early stages is to do what you did in those early stages, to make time for your relationship. We put onto our calendar doctors, soccer games, card games, all sorts of things. Well, maybe you need to put into your calendar date night, time to be with each other, things like that. You have to appreciate each other. There are studies which show that there is at least a 5-to-1 ratio of positive to negative. And by that I mean you can say 5 positive things to your partner, and then if you say 1 negative thing, it's going to outweigh the 5 positive that you've done. So you really have to be conscious of the kinds of things that you did in the beginning to make your relationship work. Couples need to know that there is going to be conflict in a relationship. Not that, when a couple comes in and says to me, oh, we never fight, that's a red flag for me. Because to me it means, don't you feel safe enough to fight with each other? So it's not, if you're going to fight, the question really is, how do you manage the conflict? Because if you manage it properly, it can actually bring you closer. You can learn more about yourself and your partner. And so, therefore, there are ways to handle your relationship. But, you're right. And the interesting thing, Steve, is that many times couples don't even know that something is happening. We take our cars for maintenance checkups all the time, but we don't check in with our partner. And then little by little, all of a sudden you wake up one morning and you go, ugh, like, I'm not happy. But you don't see it happening. So you need to be checking in with each other regularly and sort of saying, how are we doing? How did this week go? Are we off track? Periodically I say to my husband, I feel like we've gotten off track a little bit. I think that, we need to, be paying more attention to each other. But if we don't do that periodically, then little by little we get away from each other.
Yeah, I agree. And you said something about, the silence that when people say we don't fight, well, when I hear that, for me is that not fighting is a form of fighting.
Yes, you're right. I think that's a very, very astute comment.
Right, because you actually ignoring your partner. It's called, I call it the silent treatment.
Yeah. Talking about that, one time I came home and I was annoyed at my husband, and so I said something that I was upset about, and he sat there very quietly. And then because he sat quietly, I got more intense, and he still sat quietly, and I got even more intense. So this went back and forth about 5 rounds, and I finally looked at him and I said to him, don't think that just because you're not saying anything, you're not adding to this argument. So silence, absolutely, you're right, is arguing in a very unspoken but very powerful way. You're right on with that statement.
It's very sophisticated.
Yeah.
It's not that easy to ignore somebody for hours, for days, and weeks.
Yeah.
It takes mastery. So what I'm hearing is, what you're saying is that we really need to be building each other up versus tearing each other down.
Yes.
So many couples are invested in, tearing each other down.
Yes.
And I think,
and again, I'm sorry to cut you off, but again, it's easier
that's okay.
to
You're
do
from
that
New York.
and to point a finger and blame the other person rather than be vulnerable and talk about how we hurt.
Yeah. I remember you bring me back to New York. It's very fast paced. You're going to get out what you want really quickly, or somebody else will take over.
Yeah, I apologize for that. Yes, we New Yorkers tend to do that. I do apologize for that.
That's okay. That's okay. It's okay, no problem. Makes the show interesting. I love it. Interrupt me all you want. So, what I also find interesting, and I wanted to run by you, as you know, I really see you as a huge expert in this field, is when we fall in love. I have this theory. We kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy making, because we're not really falling in love with the other person. What we're falling in love with is a part of ourselves that we see reflected in the other person.
Mm. I think you're absolutely right. And when that person validates it for us or makes us feel good about ourselves, we feel good. And then, as you said before, you know, when we start to show our true selves and we're not validating the other person and that gets taken away, that's where some of the disillusionment comes from. I think, you know, you're right.
Yeah. So,
again, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to have you comment on this myth. The myth about, and is it really a myth? Do opposites really attract? Or, go ahead.
No, well, you know, with any of those, I think sometimes opposites attract, and sometimes I think that birds of a feather flock together. I will tell you what I do subscribe to. There's a theory by Harville Hendrix, who's another very big name within the relationship world, who says that we are drawn to people at a sub-awareness level who remind us of people from our family of origin where there are unresolved issues.